Greetings from sunny West Coast and welcome East Coast colleagues. My name is Fred Parisa. I'm the chair for the NADEC Education and Outreach Committee. And I'd like to welcome the National Association District Export Council webinar series. In this particular one, we've done country series, but we're doing the industry sector series on behalf in support of U.S. exporters. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, Jerry Silva, I do like to take a moment and thank our sponsor, Inland Valley Economic Development Agency, also supportive with the San Bernardino International Airport. They are truly a longtime partner of the District Export Council and the United States Department of Commerce. Under the leadership of Mike Burrows, president of IVDA SBD Airport, and also a District Export Council member, he's been, and his colleague, a key supporters in many of the District Export Council events. I'm going to talk a little bit about our sponsor, about IVDA. The Inland Valley Development Agency, they go back a long time. It's a joint powers authority formed in 1990 to oversee the redevelopment and reuse of the former Norton Air Force Base, with really the primary purpose of replacing lost jobs and promoting economic growth in the East Valley region. Now, just to give you some numbers here, is IVDA secured, in addition to many grants, a $3 million federal grant to enhance supply chain and cargo infrastructure at San Bernardino International Airport, supporting increased commercial cargo and capacity. Now, moving very quickly here, as a result of that, we have some of the recognizable largest facility here at San Bernardino International Airport is the Amazon Air Facility, UPS, and FedEx. Now, we've heard about, hey, what have we done from a California perspective? Just to quickly give you a quick number on it, IVA redevelopment efforts has attracted over 1 billion, that's right, 1 billion in private investment and positioned the region as a logistic hub for international trade. Now, the last part that I want to emphasize how important this is, we talk about jobs and jobs and jobs, but I'm just delighted to tell you that what IVDA projects has created well over 12,000 jobs in the last 3 years. So that kind of gives you the sponsor of IVDA for this webinar. I think it's important the role that IVDA provides and San Bernardino International Park. They are truly a key partner, and they are an organization that truly supports U.S. exporters. With that, I'd like to move on to our keynote speaker. It's my honor at this time to introduce Jerry Silva. I address him as Mr. Jerry Silva. He's strategic, he's an innovator, he's an entrepreneur, but I like to start out with, and Jerry, you've been involved in energy for many years. You've been a leader in the region, not just the Inland Empire region, Southern California, and the US. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up in energy.
You know, that's a really good question, Fred. And I don't know how far back you want me to take you. So I'm hoping everybody's had their coffee after lunch, especially if they're on the West Coast. So with that, I just fell into it. I was one of the very fortunate, individuals that got a call from a friend of mine that it was specifically my cousin, actually, and a friend of mine, that worked for Southern California Edison and said, "Hey, they're hiring for the summer. Why don't you come on in and apply?" And I actually got hired in October as it was supposed to be temporary, and I ended up doing 36 years. So you can say that was not a temporary job for me, but it turned out to be probably one of the best experiences I've ever had working for the company. And because of the nature of the company being in energy, I got to work in different departments, different groups. I actually worked on the very first, what I call the very first generation of what became was back then it was called pulse metering, which eventually morphed into smart metering, which is now what you see now today. But the very early phases, we did a lot of pulse metering, which we kept track of data through pulse information, which was a lot of data that we were working through. I was in charge of that program, rolled that out for our regulatory group who kept track on the metering itself. Then I actually worked in government affairs where I got to work on all the energy the energy infrastructure changes, the industry changes as became known as restructuring of the entire industry where we sold off much of our generation. And so being involved in that, then utilities got into the world of trying to become their own municipality, their own utility. I was then put on those teams. So you can say I got to be involved in a lot of the dynamics surrounded around energy, programming, government affairs, stakeholder engagement. I did all of that at an early part of my career. And um, and then an opportunity presented itself where the VP came to me to my office and said, "Hey, can we talk?" He says, "You've done a lot on this side. We're not able to get our permits, and we like to bring you into the capital side for infrastructure because our permits are getting stalled out at the state level and the federal level." And so that's how I got into the infrastructure world, working in that area. And because I had worked so long in government affairs, the one thing about government affairs, to be very effective, once you know one person, you can actually know how to network your way through whoever you need to contact in whatever departments or agencies that you need to navigate if you've got those relationships. So that's kind of how I worked into that field, and then eventually worked on some of the largest, not only substations, but worked on some of the largest infrastructure. And it's the only two-state approved project that I worked on and approved by the company was our El Dorado Ivanpah transmission, which was 35-mile of double circuit transmission to bring in essentially what was going to be 400 megawatts of concentrated solar and 185 megawatts of photovoltaic solar. So after that stint, I did that from cradle to grave. I had an opportunity to move into sort of the compliance area where I got to work, where I see one of my colleagues, my former colleagues on here, who works on the generation side. So I got to work closely with the whole generation team. And then I got to see what the impacts of solar was to the generation side. So when you see all of the components that feed into operations, feed into the power generation, feed into power qualities, feed into stakeholder engagement, you get a pretty good handle of basically the challenges that impact energy. And then from then, I had an opportunity to go work for Department of Energy in the Office of Economic Impact. So I took the exit package that Edison was basically providing and left for Edison for DOE, did a stint there in that office and had the opportunity to work in an area that got to work with grants. So I was in charge of grants, which I did for the company early in my career because as a region manager, you were in charge of your own budgets, community grants, and making sure and submitting them. So I had this as part of my portfolio to begin with. So did a lot of that. Got involved in that, came out, and before I knew it, I had another VP call me from the company, goes, "Hey, what are you doing? There's some positions that are open, and I think you might be a good fit for some of these positions." And eventually it turned into, one contract turned into two contracts and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden I get a call from my former boss that I worked with in DOE, and you know, he was the chief diversity officer for DOE, but he was also the director of the Office of Economic Impact. Calls, he goes, "Hey, I just got hired as the deputy commerce secretary for Virginia." He goes, "I just got approved a $12 million energy grant fund." He says, "I need to bring somebody that I know knows the business, knows how to roll out the program, and somebody that knows how to push back that on projects that really don't fit the area. So coming from that community of a disadvantaged, low income, I had to learn. I had to come and learn the area. I said, "Hey, I'm there. Here I go. Off to the East Coast I went." So that's how I got started, Fred. That's how I got into the work I've been doing, and it's been an energy related, almost from day one, from the day I ended up in the what I call the power engineering group on special projects and working in that area.
Jerry, you have absolutely amazing, interesting career given the restructuring of electricity market. I wanted to ask you, how has that impacted energy policy? Not only that we're both from California, but how does that impact nationwide, Jerry?
Well, it's interesting when you go from California and then I migrated over to Virginia, everybody tries to say the rates are different. At the end of the day, utilities don't really change differently. They may have different terms that they use, but at the end of the day, they're going to base their revenue based on their capital investment. That's the bottom line. That's how the system works. So they get paid based on the utility submitting their proposals to the Public Utilities Commission. And in California, it's called the California Public Utilities Commission. In Virginia, it's called the ACC Commission. And essentially, it's a regulatory body that looks at the proposals and looks at everything you're proposing, and everything gets analyzed and everything gets approved based on what you're submitting. What people don't realize is there's not enough advocacy from what I have seen to where how these impacts really benefit the various communities, because some of these programs can actually have a higher cost um, to the impacts to the communities. I mean, you've kind of seen it here in California, and in Virginia, you've kind of seen how some programs are being thrust upon, like wind, for example. If you look at the cost of wind in Virginia, that's not going to be as cost effective as natural gas or coal generation. Granted, you've got a component of environmental concerns that comes with coal, but you've got to look at the cost of the fuel as well. So those are examples of where rates can have a huge impact on the communities, especially if you have customers that are leaving a territory that rate structure is based on the amount of customers that are in that territory with the potential of growth to accompany it. So those are some of the challenges that you're looking at. And so what you've got to do is what's now entered into that space is you've got these large customers that are looking for ways to offset and you're going to hear the terms. They want to be part of the behind the meter strategies, which is all, hey, how can we basically shave our demands, reduce our load, our consumptions, and the other things that you're seeing that I'm seeing quite a bit of is, all right, how can I reduce my cost so therefore my cost to the utility is reduced, or my exposure to the cost of utility is reduced.
Jerry, many of us here that are attending the webinar, including myself as a SME company, uh, we're always looking in terms of building infrastructure and get major projects, small project approved, uh, perhaps more at the local level, at the state level, but also at the federal level. Based on that, can you share some insight in your experience in that?
Sure. If there's one thing that I learned when I was at Department of Energy is you got to have an overarching strategy. For example, if you were to look at nuclear, because of the incidents that occurred, in the 70s, um, and not only in the United States but in other countries, with safety became a concern. But the licensing for nuclear is takes a minimum of 10 years. In today's environment, we've got to reduce those regulatory timeframes, especially if you're going to try to meet the demands that are occurring now for a generation that's being requested, especially in these communities. It's a key concern for economic development groups because you've got these industries that want to come in, but then they find out, it may take you years to either get the infrastructure to that particular facility or enough generation to feed that facility over a period of time. So that particular company ends up not looking at that particular site or not expanding their operation and looking elsewhere. So those are the challenges that you're kind of faced with, unless you can start to reimagine energy in a different way by saying, okay, how can we take a look at the infrastructure holistically and say, what are some good projects that can actually fit into these areas that might be more advantageous with the resources you have, and then look at expansion throughout those areas. The challenge you have is, utilities will look at infrastructure as critical infrastructure. They will not share that information or data, even though their planning people are already forecasting where the potential growth will be in the next 3 to 5 years. So it's sort of a challenge of, hey, how do we look at this in the future, knowing that we've got demands, and it's almost a give and a take and a push and a shove kind of situation, or a push and a pull, I should say, kind of situation, where you got to work with the different agencies, the different groups in order to get the information. There is ways to do it, but you've got to be very, very in tune to how the process works.
Dive down a little bit as far as states. We've got representations, of course, 50 states, 1,800 deck members here. In this particular case, each and every one of them representing any of those states. In this particular case, I'm going to kind of address and look at the state of Virginia, and where they rolled out a $12 million energy fund. Want to get your input on that. One, how did that come about? And two, what are some of the early hurdles and experience and jumping through loops on that you have experienced? I think we're all looking at that, and gosh, this would be a great input on that.
First of all, that credit goes to at the time his title was Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Director Campos, Secretary Campos, Deputy Secretary Campos, James Campos. And again, he saw the opportunity. He had the vision to see the opportunity to say, hey, I've looked at the entire tobacco, because that was part of his portfolio of agencies that fell under his responsibility, and he saw an opportunity to take an initiative to go reach out to the commissioners and say, I think we ought to be entering in the engineering space or the energy space, because that's going to become an economic development engine. Without energy, you've got no economic development, period, in his perspective. So that's when he carved it out and made the requests and made worked in educating the commissioners to push that initiative. And then once it got approved, that's when he reached out to me and goes, okay, now I need somebody that I can actually trust to roll it out and prepare it. I think the one thing I learned, actually, there was a couple of things I learned when I got there, is that when you look at rolling out any value, and by the way, 12 million is just the initial budget that we were given. We've almost expended all of the monies in what we call 6,000 for each region. And from what I understand, more money will be allocated, and it'll be a much larger amount in the future. But I say this because if there's anything that you learn in any particular job you go into, or any particular position, the first thing you want to do is sort of get a lay of the land, sort of, hey, what's the landscape? So what I did is, I requested within about a month, I requested to go meet with all the various stakeholders and ask them, where do they see the opportunity being in energy space? Because you have to collect that information in order to understand, okay, what's the current inventory of large. I remember asking this question, Fred, and you should have seen the look on people's faces. And it was it's just an education question, but you realize there was a gap there. Is, hey, where all your load centers are in this communities? And they gave me this blank look, and you realize, okay, they don't realize, in the rural area, there's not a whole lot of load centers, meaning that's all your industrial areas, that's all your manufacturing areas. Those are all your high energy users within a specific area. But that was my California lingo, trying to bring it into Virginia lingo, and you realize, oh boy, that was a disconnect. That was an opportunity for me to learn on that. So and they coached me really well, and they're very southernly in coaching me, making sure I did a very good job of articulating in the future certain terms, certain words, and certain comments on things that I found. Now, the good news is I've developed a ton of relationships in that space because of I'm more of I love just seeing what the problem is and solving it. I don't, I can move around bureaucracies pretty quickly. And Fred, you worked enough with me in the past to know, yeah, when somebody tells you no, it's like, okay, thank you. I'll just figure out another way around, to the solution you got to get to. And I pretty much accomplished that same attitude, wherever I've gone, whether it's Department of Energy or Virginia. Because at the end of the day, some people may not see that vision, or some people may not see how that works, and you've got to literally know what the end result is going to look like in order to achieve that. So rolling out that $12 million, we've actually, and I'll give you one example. Actually, I'll give you two project examples. City of Danville approached me, their utilities department, and wanted to do a 12 megawatt battery storage project. And when I saw this project, I had a ton of really good technical questions for them, and they realized they were not ready based on my technical questions. So they held back their application, waited till the next cycle, and resubmitted it based on the questions I had previously asked. Now that they were ready, the project got approved by our commissioners, and the savings that they're going to save just by load shaving, and when I mean load shaving, demand shaving, when energy is at the highest point, and utilizing those batteries to shave that load and not using energy at the highest cost, they're saving themselves millions over the lifespan of this project. That's just one example, and we played a role in seeing that project get approved. The next one that I'm looking forward to seeing was a 5 megawatt natural gas facility. People thought that was going to be a little bit more difficult to approve because it's natural gas, but natural gas is a great baseload fuel. In fact, I've got a person on here that can actually articulate that really well. But you can't get rid of one fuel if it's going to cost you more in the open market to purchase it. So this particular project was proposed in such a way that they already had their own infrastructure. So it made sense for them to go out in the open market to go actually propose getting their own 5 megawatts of natural gas units. And that one got approved. And both in the case of both those projects, there is a workforce development component to each of those projects that highlights the savings, the impacts to the community, the reducing of energy bills over the lifespan of the project. Now, again, I think we're going to see the battery project probably reach that fruition a lot faster than the 5 megawatts of natural gas, because there is actually a technical component to that project, but that I think they're trying to get the skill sets for that. But that's an example. In this next round, it's going to be interesting to see what comes. We did have a waste energy that got approved also in that same round. That's a 1 megawatt. So that's the stuff that you are looking at in tobacco footprint that's being approved, and the commissioners have taken a very, very visionary look in adopting what Director Campos has laid out as an opportunity for Virginia Energy, not only there but for the state as well.
Yeah, definitely fit the description of a small, medium enterprise company. Being an innovator, being an entrepreneur, working among public and private sector. But I think one of the things that really touched me is that your overall experience that you started out with in energy and to where you got today. And I think, second of all, is that the impact in how you work. You can't get out of energy policy. It's part of that. And you mentioned that not only in California, but nationwide. But I think the one that highlighted that I thought that was important is the infrastructure. Whether it's a small project or major project, whether it's approved at the state or at the federal level. I mean, you really bring in a lot of good insights on that. And finally, you did show us some great example, not only in California, but also in the state of Virginia. Wow, rolling out that $12 million fund. That is just amazing. That's not easy, my friend. And having said that, it's just it's these kind of personal experience, Jerry, that we share with our colleagues here on the call. And this, by the way, this is going to be recorded. This is so important on that. But I wanted to kind of summarize and get your bird's eye view, what your perspective is. One, Jerry, where do you see energy moving towards for this administration, especially for hydrogen?
Okay.
The other one is nuclear. You touched a little bit on that. Geothermal, we've got a lot out of here in the West Coast. Solar, and really, quite frankly, it's really all of the above energy, Jerry.
Right.
So I kind of gonna get you did a nice summary on that, but wanted to get your perspective on how these things come about.
Well, and thank you for that, Fred. I think what you're going to see from Secretary Wright, who's now, the secretary in charge of Department of Energy, he's big on geothermal, and there's products and people that I've actually connected with that have reached out that have said, hey, we're looking at these opportunities. Again, I think what it's going to come down to is how to leverage those opportunities, connecting the right people to the right projects. I mean, that's always the biggest challenge. And the good thing is, again, I do a pretty good job of trying to see all the pieces and try to look at the horizon in a way that maybe others might not see it, only because of my background and experience. That's the only reason why. Not because I'm smarter than anybody else. I just think I've had more shared experiences of being involved in what I call the frontline experiences of working with all the different groups. So with that, it brings me a lot of experience to be able to say those things. I think what you also see with geothermal is, I've been working closely with the military, and the military is actually looking close at adopting some of those strategies as part of their military base, because that was under the previous administration in working with some of the military officials that I've been working with. They were trying to look at sort of a menu of options to be able to bring renewable into the military bases, and as well as looking at making sure their cybersecurity networks weren't compromised and their national security networks were not compromised in any way, shape, or form. So you're going to see that. The other option that I've been privy to is you're going to see solar manufacture try to come back into the United States. So a lot of the manufacturing is left. Well, you're going to try to see supply chains get developed around. I mean, people don't realize we've had nuclear substations out of Norfolk, Virginia, out of those bases. I think there's something like over 20 subs that are based out of there. Nuclear subs, by the way. I believe they're nuclear subs. Could be off on that. But don't quote me on that. But I know there's about 20 subs, period. Out of that, I don't know how many, if all are nuclear subs, but I would believe they are. But I got to do my homework next time on that one. But with that, you've got all of the components that from building to the skill sets that are required. That's all workforce development that's related. You got the supply chains, everything that feeds into building a nuclear sub is all part of part of bringing that back to the United States. I mean, that's where I think your export council could be part of this, right? How are we going to look at bringing some of these supply chains and working with the different countries to ensure national security for these major opportunities in manufacturing? So with solar, you're looking at that hydrogen. There was one hydrogen facility that I happened to have the opportunity to go visit. I thought they had a great business model, and they're already at capacity, but they're looking to expand. I think there's more opportunity for them. But unfortunately, I think they're looking for their fuel is ammonia. So they're trying to duplicate what they have is where can we get the ammonia that's literally on site to the facility. So you're going to have to look at, the one thing I found with hydrogen that's not the same doesn't apply to the electricity companies is you never say, hey, what's my color of my electricity coming into my house? But they keep constantly asking what's the color of the hydrogen that's going to be produced. I want green energy. Well, if you want a green energy come into your house in terms of electricity, I can assure you it would be double of what you're paying now. So I think there's got to be a level playing field for not only hydrogen, but on whether it's, I'm going to give you a color, blue. Blue is supposed to mean it's being derived from natural gas or sources to generate hydrogen. So those are examples of where we got to be on the same level playing field in order to generate that. I think you're going to see, the hydrogen hubs will probably be evaluated to see if that many are going to be kept or possibly reduced. Um, you're looking at EVs. I think EVs you've already seen the mandate lifted. Um, so, cars can go back to, gasoline produced vehicles without the mandates. So those are all things that you're having to look at as part of the fuels that are going to be all of the above. And the latest one that the president just signed was coal. He wants to revisit abandoned coals that may have been idle for some years to say, I want to bring it back to life. And I know in some areas and some groups that's going to be a concern. But again, if you were to look at how much energy is needed and what the cost is versus all the other challenges, I think there's just got to be a balance in both areas to find compromise and bring that fuel back online in order to meet the some of the emerging challenges of meeting this energy demand, especially in some of these areas. I don't know if you knew this, but in Northern Virginia, there's actually the utility will actually call one of the circuits, they call it um, um, data center alley, because it's literally like one circuit that represents all these data centers. So that can be definitely a challenge when you're trying to meet the demand of all this energy that's required. And I'm not talking just electricity. You got natural gas that's part of that fuel composition. You got LNG that's part of that fuel composition. You got water. People don't realize water is a fuel. It feeds our hydroelectricity plants. Those are all things that are going to be needed. And when there's a lot of hydro, it reduces the need for all the other electricity that's generated or required.
Jerry, I wanted to kind of highlight everything, whether it's energy or any other, is that it starts locally, doesn't it?
It
So,
does.
uh, so I wanted to get your input if you had any incoming events that's coming up. I believe there's one of them that you started there 3 years ago. Can you share us with some of those details, please?
Say that again, just so I got the question right, Fred. Locally? Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. So yeah, no, one of the programs that I had Fred, the good thing about being in the line of work I've done, I've come up with a lot of crazy ideas that have been adopted and they're still going. I mean, some I did when my former job, when I was at Southern California Edison, called the Legislative Power Lunch. It was something I created, something I believed in, where you got almost every branch of government represented as part of a panel discussion. And it was unheard of back then. But unfortunately or unfortunately, I knew each legislative branch and I knew the legislators directly. So it made it easy for me to say, no, I think I can get every legislator to say yes to doing this, even though some of them didn't care for each other. And so what happened one time, I'm talking to Mike Burrows, one day. I say, Mike, I have this crazy idea. He says, what? I said, why don't I take what I did on the legislative power lunch side and why don't we create a sort of an education in energy? And we'll call it Leaders in Energy kind of summit. And he loved the concept. He goes, let's do it. We need to do something and we need to educate our communities that are in disadvantaged areas. So, that event will take place June 5th. It's been a pretty pretty much a staple now in the community and in the surrounding areas. Um, but it's those kind of programs that also bring and highlight not only innovators, but also some of the key. I mean, we're going to have the CEO of Stater Brothers as one of our keynote speakers. We're going to have the former gas company president and CEO, Dennis Ariola, as part of the fire chat conversation. So, when you have those relationships and you've been able to build those over long periods of time, it's easy for you to pick up the phone and go, "Hey, I got this crazy idea. Are you in?" And, usually they just want to know what they're going to talk about. Usually is more of the challenge, and trying to keep them to, a panel, a small length of panel time. That's usually the challenge that you have. So that's going to happen June 5th. It's going to happen at the Ontario Airport in SoCal. So that's an example of one, the program that we're looking at setting up in Virginia. Again, hopefully the RFP will serve as sort of a template on making sure that you've got programs and initiatives that highlight all of the above energy and focus in on, the one thing I know that I'm trying to do there more effectively is build a stakeholder engagement list, so you can reach out to the economic development agencies, you can reach out to the county administrators, the elected officials in a much more broader targeted way than we've done in the past. And so I've been working at that almost from the time I've gotten there. And so I've gotten better at almost getting that list together from the time I started. That's been that was one of my initial gaps that I identified early, Fred, when I first got there.
For those that will miss this and could only see Jerry virtually, and you want to get his autograph, May 19th is the time where you could really meet in person. Jerry, this has been one of the most fascinating, very educational, and you really summarized, which is very tough, especially in the area of energy. You did it quite well. But I think that's important for those of you that are going to be in DC. We did provide a linkage on May the 19th through the 20th. It's an opportunity to meet Jerry and his colleague. Who's your other colleague that's going to be on the panel speaker there, Jerry?
James Campos.
Yeah. Can you mention a little bit about him? That he's going to.
James has a history of working for the governor in Nevada, and then had an opportunity to go be the and I mentioned this earlier in the segment, had a chance to take a position as the chief diversity officer as well as the director of the Office of Economic Impact at the Department of Energy. He actually rolled out several what they called pillars back then, which is several different initiatives. And then I came in at the latter part of the administration to actually work as a senior advisor under him and roll out what they call the ambassador program, and that was dignitaries across the spectrum that represented different industries on energy. And so he's now, and then he had the opportunity to be he was Senate confirmed, by the way, and then he had an opportunity to go to Virginia, become their deputy Commerce Secretary, and also director of the Tobacco Commission, Revitalization Commission, overseeing that as well. And so he's going to be there on May 19th as well.
Thank you, Jerry.
At
I
the
want to open
Mayflower.
it up for some.
At the
Sorry.
Mayflower.
Yes, I wanted to open up for some questions that are out there. So now's the time. If you have any questions for Mr. Silva, please do so at this time. I know, Jerry, you covered quite a bit on that. And I'm looking forward to just hearing the recording on it. I've learned a lot about this. Any questions?
One thing I'll add, because I know there's some people on here that that may jar. A lot of people, and you talked about it, Fred, a lot of this stems from local level, starting at the local level. A lot of people don't realize, even at the local level, the challenges that I often experienced when working with the city engineer, the public works director, how their capital projects really weren't fully thought through. And I say that in the most loving way I can, because they were so focused on money being spent for whether it was sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure, cable infrastructure. But what I saw happen over my tenure at Edison is they would lay the groundwork for the sewer infrastructure. They had a plan, they had a 5-year plan. Then you had a different project manager assigned a different area, and that project manager didn't talk to the one that was doing the project. And what you would see happen, and I kid you not, I saw this more often than I didn't over a period of 3 to 5 years. After the pavement got the new road got built, got slurried, got taken care of 6 months later, it gets cut up because somebody forgot to call the cable company and put in the infrastructure that was associated with whatever they were installing. And I say that because it's the not looking at the big picture of projects as a holistic strategy. And so what ends up happening is oftentimes more costs go into redoing what should have already been handled in the beginning stages. And so when I took my background and knowledge, I took it a lot to getting approvals quickly because I was able to see sort of the bigger picture of, all right, guys, hey, we're requesting this, but couldn't we use this, which is, yeah, it's going to be incremental costs, but over the life of this project, it's going to be nominal. And that's how I got projects approved.
Jerry, here is a question that came up from Terry Maddox. And the question is, how will artificial intelligence affect electricity demand? Wow.
I think Terry could actually answer that one, but I think he's testing my knowledge of him, knowing that question. I think artificial intelligence is going to actually do a better job of more analysis and be able to provide better options as to what the risks are but also where the improvements can be, because it's going to take in more and more knowledge of as it evaluates all these different combinations of problems that they've experienced, whether it's an install, whether it's purchasing of the energy, whether it's the cost of energy. All that's going to eventually be analyzed, and AI is going to say, these are going to be the best top 2 strategies to meet this future demand of energy, and it's going to take into account weather forecasts and all the other elements. How'd I do, Terry?
Think he gave a thumbs up on that. 2 thumbs up there, Jerry. So with that, he said, outstanding answer. So in closing, Jerry, I'd like to we summarized a little bit, and you did really cover quite a bit from a practical perspective. I think that's the most important part. That's the message that I got out of this. In closing, is there anything we missed on this that you would like to highlight?
I the only thing I'd like to highlight, I've seen solar thermal technology. Um, and when you see all these different innovative ideas, I've seen invisible fences where they use robotic dogs to try to guard a substation that was being it was being tested by the military, by the way. And they used these small wind funnels as small turbines, basically, to offset energy. There's a lot of technology out there that's still being tested, and I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot more innovation come online and being demonstrated as opportunities to offset some of this generation impacts that you're seeing, because there's not going to be enough energy in the short term. It'll come in the long term, but it's not going to come in the short term. There's too much being requested of the system. I mean, especially you see it in different areas. You got data centers that are being requested, AI impacts. I mean, all this got actually compounded when COVID hit. So I really have to say, on the solar thermal side, I love the technology, but for some reason there's still a gap there, and hopefully, you'll see that gap be filled in some way or capacity. Even though I've got tons of resources, it still has its challenges on how they're gonna be adopted. So, but they got to keep plugging away. So that's my food for thought, and hopefully I'll see some of these great guests on May 19th at the Mayflower in DC.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Let me just summarize, and I wanted to add a couple of resources. During my introduction, I mentioned key partners, and of course, one of our key partners is the Inland Valley Development Agency, and of course, San Bernardino International Airport, who is also a DEC member, one of 1,800 members across 50 states. I think in today's world, it's important that Jerry already mentioned is the collaboration, the partnership. It's the public and private partnership. And I want to add another great resource that sometimes we forget. One of our strongest partners at the federal level is the United States Department of Commerce, International Trade Administration, specifically the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service. I'm going to share with you, if you need more information, if you need more assistance in accessing through their over 70 offices and offices worldwide, you simply pull up www.trade.gov. And they're the best, the men and women, they're very well dedicated. They support U.S. exporters. And I think it's important that we mention that as a District Export Council member, as a private sector company like both Jerry and myself. It's a balance. It's a balance that we as U.S. companies cannot sometimes go out there alone and penetrating U.S. markets overseas. So it's a balance of both collaboration and partnership between the U.S. government and the private sector. And with that, Jerry, thank you very much on behalf of the National District Export Council. We look forward to collaborating and meeting you in person on May the 19th. And thank you again on behalf of U.S. exporters. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.